G'day legends and welcome back to the High Country Hard Enduro channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm out in the bush test riding the Beta RX350 two-stroke, and instead of keeping it on a motocross track where it technically belongs, I want to see how it actually performs where I ride, in the bush, doing enduro and off-road terrain. Now, before we start, I just want to baseline everyone's expectations and to give some examples of the sort of riding I'll be referring to in this video. Motocross, what this bike is designed for. Enduro, the conditions I'll be testing this bike in. And hard enduro, what I won't be testing this bike in. Now, full disclosure, I ride hard enduro. I'm not a motocross guy, I don't ride groomed tracks, I don't rail berms, and I'm not interested in whoops or jumps. What I do care about is how the bike handles in the bush, in single track, over rocks, logs, ledges, and natural terrain. The RX350 is an interesting bike. The engine is pretty unique in the current market, and on paper, it actually makes a lot of sense for off-road riding. So today, we're finding out how that theory holds up. Now normally when you think of a motocross two-stroke, you think peaky, aggressive, on-off power, but this motor is different. It's got a lot of rotational mass, it's incredibly torquey, and it behaves far more like a four-stroke than a traditional two-stroke. For off-road riding, that's appealing. Torque, tractability, and the ability to lug a gear higher through natural terrain is what matters, not screaming revs. On paper, this engine has the potential to be an absolute weapon in the bush, even if the bike technically wasn't designed for it. Now before we get onto the bike, I'll just give you a quick rundown of the bike itself. Here is the Beta RX350 that I picked up from Hills Moto Services in Wodonga. Now this particular bike has a few mods already done, notably the TSP cylinder head, twin wall handlebars, aftermarket grips, aftermarket handguards, and a 13-tooth front sprocket over the OEM 14-tooth. Now, admittedly, it's not bone stock, but it's a pretty realistic setup for someone who actually rides. So how does this compare to something like the 300RR or RR Race? There are some important differences to note. Firstly, the gearbox on the RX is motocross based, closer ratios compared to the wide ratio Enduro gearbox, and is only 5-speed. Different mapping and ignition focus, different subframe and chassis intent, a 19-inch rear wheel instead of the 18, suspension valving aimed at motocross, not enduro. The RR is purpose-built for enduro racing. The RX is not pretending to be that, but interestingly, it still works pretty damn well off-road. Now, the first thing I'll say, this bike still feels very similar to the Beta Enduro bike, which surprised me. Ergonomics are basically the same as the RR range. Standing position feels familiar, controls feel familiar, and a lot of other parts are shared across the Beta platform. If you've ridden a Beta Enduro bike before, you'll feel at home almost immediately. It's easy to ride, it's fun, and it doesn't feel like some wild motocross animal once you get it out into the bush. Now, for what I like about the bike. The engine is the standout, no question. This thing is very, very torquey, there's heaps of power absolutely everywhere, but it's still totally manageable. The power delivery is smooth and linear, almost four-stroke like, which is exactly what you want for single-track riding. It'll lug through technical sections effortlessly, no frantic clutch work required. But when you want to turn it on, it still has that raw two-stroke punch. And honestly, it sounds unreal. When you light it up, it's got a really nice note to it. It feels strong without being intimidating. Next on to suspension. Suspension is another area where the bike really surprised me. Both the RX and the RR Race range run the KYB suspension, but they're set up very differently. I've always found the RR Race Edition KYBs to be too soft, especially when you start riding aggressively or hitting obstacles hard. The RX suspension, being motocross based, is firm, and for the way I ride, that actually works pretty well in the bush. The shock in particular is excellent. It gives me confidence to attack logs, ledges, rock steps, without that horrible rebound kick that tries to send you over the handlebars. However, the forks, if I'm being brutally honest, do feel a little bit harsh in the initial part of the stroke, which makes sense given the motocross setup, but for bush riding, that could easily be improved with a bladder kit or a revalve, and then I think it'd be spot on. First, the foot pegs. They're the standard Beta pegs, same as the RR or X Pro range. They work, but they're slippery. Not great in the wet or for aggressive riding. I'd personally swap these out straight away for something more aggressive, ideally in the 5mm down and 5mm back configuration. And secondly, just being picky, the 19-inch rear wheel. In the bush, especially with a little bit of technical terrain, it's not ideal. It makes the bike a bit more nervous and harder to manage over roots and rocks compared to an 18-inch rear wheel. Gearing is another one. Now, it's not bad, but it's not perfect for bush riding either. That's something you could dial in pretty easily with some testing and sprocket changes. It also stalls easier than the Enduro range, which I'll just put down to the motocross influence gearbox and mapping. Now, this is only an issue in technical sections, and it's generally not a problem at all for single track. And finally, the clutch is heavier. Again, motocross. This is good news as you can easily swap in a clutch spring from the Enduro range to light it up. A cheap and easy fix. Now, is the bike suitable for Enduro or off-road? 100% yes, absolutely. In single track and bush riding, the RX350 performs exceptionally well. The motor is very torquey and extremely tractable. With strong power right down low in the rev range, you can ride a gear higher than you normally would, just let it lug and it just keeps pulling without complaint. That makes it easy to manage in tighter terrain where smooth throttle control matters more than outright aggression. The low RPM response is excellent, there's no frantic hit, no need to constantly fan the clutch, it hooks up, drives forward and maintains traction. Now that's a huge advantage in off-road riding, especially in slick or uneven terrain. Now because the power delivery is so linear and predictable, it doesn't feel like a traditional motocross 2-stroke once you're out in the bush. It behaves more like a 4-stroke in the way it builds power but still gives you that snap when you ask for it. So, as an enduro or off-road bike, particularly for single track and flowing bush terrain, the RX350 makes a lot of sense, and it performs far better than you'd expect from something with motocross roots. The Beta RX350 is a seriously impressive bike. It would make an excellent off-road race bike, or a very capable trail bike for a more aggressive rider. It's especially well suited to someone who's already familiar with the Beta Enduro range and wants something a little bit different. Now, it's not a hard enduro machine, nor is it designed to be, but it's far more capable in the bush than you'd expect from a motocross-based platform, and that 350cc 2-stroke engine is super fun to ride. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you then. Yeah.